Okay, I'll start video now.
Connectra creates opportunities for people living with disabilities by providing information, resources, and programming geared towards greater inclusion and quality of life. Check out some of the programs we offer through our online learning platform, Connect Together, including our Service Mondays, where we highlight a local organization or initiative, Wednesday Chair Yoga with Bobby Seal-Kobiski, Thursday Adapted Fitness with Megan Williamson, Friday Rotating Dance Classes hosted by Janice Lawrence and Joanne Cuff, and other initiatives including presentations by the Disabled Independent Gardeners Association's Growable program and our Perspective series.
Our next Accessible Community Forum is on accessible education. Be part of the conversation on November 18th from 1 to 3 p.m. as we discuss the current accessible education climate in BC. Register today at accessibleeducationacf.eventbrite.ca.
Check out our updated programs calendar on our website, connectra.org, or find us on Facebook at Connectra Society.
Okay, you can start.
Okay, thank you. One moment. Go. And are you able to see my PowerPoint okay?
Yeah.
Lovely, thank you. Okay, welcome. My name is Brianne Braun, and I'm here today representing Family Network for Deaf Children and our summer program, Deaf Youth Today. And I'd like to start off by just sharing a quick video.
Acknowledging traditional territory. We would like to acknowledge and thank the Coast Salish nations of Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish, on whose traditional territory we teach, learn, and live. Hajka.
I always like to start off with that, and I will also just like to acknowledge that I am joining you today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Kwantlen, the Katzie, and the Semiahmoo First Nations. So before we get started, I just wanted to touch upon the term deaf. And FNDC, Family Network for Deaf Children, and Deaf Youth Today uses the term deaf as an umbrella term. So that is inclusive of all deaf, hard of hearing, deaf blind, deaf disabled, and late deafened children and youth. You'll also notice that little d, big D deaf. And the big D deaf is a way of speaking to the language and culture of the deaf community and American Sign Language. And that little d deaf refers to the medical perspective of hearing loss, of a person not being able to hear. So you'll sometimes see that in writing and wonder what the difference is between the two, and that's it. But throughout the presentation, I'll be using the term deaf, but I am speaking about children and youth who are deaf, who are hard of hearing, who are using sign language, maybe a mix of sign language and spoken language, children with additional disabilities, and all are encompassed within that term. So the deaf community itself, apart from being, members of the disability community, they're also a linguistic and cultural minority within society. More than 90% of deaf children are born to non-deaf parents. So this is actually quite different because it's not typical that you wouldn't have that same shared language and culture automatically as your parents, but for the vast majority of deaf children, that is the case. For many families, when their deaf child is born, that is the first deaf person that they meet, or the first person with a hearing difference that they're aware of. So it can be, quite a lot to take in for families. Deaf individuals are really just as diverse as mainstream society, but specifically in terms of the language that they use and the communication preferences they have, it's a spectrum. And so it's a really good idea never to assume that this is how a person wants to communicate, or this is the language they want to use. Check in with them, and it also might change from one setting to another. And the community, like I say, is also extremely diverse, persons with disabilities coming from different backgrounds. That wide range of diversity you see in mainstream society, you see within the deaf community as well. Deaf individuals themselves may or may not use assistive technologies, whether that it could be a compatibility issue or it could be a personal choice. So things like hearing aids or cochlear implants can be very personal decisions. And sometimes people prefer to use technology in some settings or in some communication environments and not in others. And so again, it's just really important to respect personal choice. So this is my family. We are the Brauns. I'm Brianne, my husband Dan, and my two children, Argyle and Aurelia. So as I just mentioned previously, that 90% of deaf children are born to non-deaf parents. My family is in that 10%. We're a little bit different. My husband Dan is genetically deaf. His parents are deaf. His grandparents are deaf. And so our daughter was born deaf, and she is the fourth generation of a deaf individual in our family. We knew that any children we had could be born deaf. So again, that's very different than what most parents experience, because we were aware of that before we decided to have children. And our oldest was born with typical hearing. And so we really just, didn't know what was going to be the case. And then our daughter came along and she was born deaf. So it didn't, to us, it was like, is she going to have red hair? Is my son going to be short or tall? Or it's just another characteristic of our family members. When our son was born, we signed with him and exposed him to ASL from birth. So we're a bilingual family, both English and ASL. So when his sister came along, he was already fluent, and we use both English and ASL at home and are very much a part of the deaf community. So I myself wear many hats in the community. So in addition to my work with Family Network for Deaf Children, I also primarily, I originally went into interpreting. So I'm a registered ASL English interpreter, and that's what really connected me to the community in the first place. And then more recently, I started working for FNDC, and I also work for Surrey Schools as a consultant and parent liaison. And I also serve as the board president of the Deaf Children's Society of BC. It is a very small community. Lots of people wear lots of different hats. So I'm very pleased to be here speaking to you today on behalf of FNDC. So FNDC was founded about 30 years ago, and at that time there was early intervention services. So when families discovered that they had a deaf or hard of hearing child, maybe around age 2 or 3, when maybe language wasn't developing as people would expect it would, testing would prove that their child was deaf or hard of hearing. And at that time, there would be supports in terms of speech language therapy, instruction in sign language, supporting families with early assistive technologies like hearing aids. But what happened was children would graduate from these services and go off to school, and there really wasn't anything else in place to support the family after those children started school. So families at the time said they likened it to just driving off a cliff. The limited support that they did have just stopped, and they didn't know where to go next. They didn't know what to do or how to just continue to support their child outside of the educational setting. So some of those parents got together. It was 4 moms, and at that point, they all had preschool age deaf children. And they started to think about where were they going to go from here? What were they going to do? And they created a family network for deaf children. It's a nonprofit organization, and its main goal at that time was to advocate for change, to advocate for more services, to ensure that deaf children's language access needs were included when policies were being made and decisions were being made that would impact deaf children and youth. So they didn't really have too much of a plan when they started. They just knew that they needed more and that they were going to have to be the change they wanted to see. So FNDC has some core principles, and I'll just go through some of those. So deaf children reach their full potential through a supportive home environment. And families have the right to make informed choices based on the needs of their deaf child. So really what that means is that children have a right to all of the things that a typical child has, in their home life, but really that language access is paramount. So whatever that looks like for that child, whether that's a spoken language or a sign language, it's ensuring that that child has robust and really a language-rich environment for them to grow up in. Deaf children have the right to age-level language equal to their hearing peers. Unfortunately, we often see people dismiss deaf children or think that limited language is okay because they're deaf and they're doing the best that they can. But really, it's just because that child hasn't had the opportunity to have full access to an accessible language. Children should be able to learn language effortlessly. And that is the case for our typically hearing children who are exposed to language from birth at home, in the community, with extended family. And for children who are deaf or hard of hearing, that access is really limited. And for some children who don't have access to spoken language at all, you really have to ensure that there are opportunities for them to have full access via a visual language. And in North America, that's typically American Sign Language in where we reside, but there's also Langue de Signes Québécois, LSQ, and we also have different Indigenous sign languages. So whatever sign language it is, visual language it is, just ensuring that that child does get that access and is not held to a lower standard just because they're not getting the language access that they should have. Deaf children have the right to a quality education in a language that provides full access. So same as what I was just saying, but that continues on into preschool and K-12 educational settings. So not only do they have the right to have access to that language, you have the right to professionals who are fluent in that language and can educate in that language. Each child is unique and has individual abilities and needs that must be recognized. Like mainstream society, children are very diverse, coming from different backgrounds, all sorts of impacts on the family. And of deaf children, about 40% of deaf children have an additional support need or an additional disability. So really, it is a very diverse community, and just need to make sure that we're supporting all of those needs of that child, not just some. Sometimes what happens, unfortunately, is there's a focus on some of those other disabilities and the language access piece gets ignored, or there's a focus on the language access piece and people who can communicate with that child in ASL, but there are no professionals in some of those specialties that need to support some of those additional disabilities who also have that ASL fluency. So it can be a bit of a juggling act sometime, but figuring out what that child needs and ensuring that they're getting it. The rich and varied experiences and language of the deaf community are a valuable resource for deaf children and their families. So this again speaks to the fact that 90% of deaf children are born to non-deaf parents. So where does that learning happen? How do parents connect with the deaf community? How do they understand what it is that their child's life is going to be like? And really, we have to reach out and include and just really respect the lived experience of deaf individuals and ask them to share, because they've gone through it. They know. And as much as we can be allies to the community and be involved in the community, without that lived experience, I can't say, this is what that's like, or I know this, because I don't. So the deaf community has so many amazing leaders, and it's a very giving community in terms of supporting children and supporting families. Just pretty much any time, deaf individuals are very happy to support that next generation. I wouldn't change you for the world, but I would change the world for you. So like any parent of a child with a disability, you know that our society is not always the most welcoming, or it's not designed for the access needs for our children, whether that's a physical disability, cognitive disability, language access right, whatever that may be. Sometimes we have to advocate, and then pretty hard to see the change that we know that our children deserve. So these parents, these moms came together, and like I say, didn't really know what they were going to be doing at that time, but they just took it one step at a time, figured it out along the way, and had some successes, had some challenges, but they brought about a whole host of changes, really amazing things in our province that I will now speak to. One moment. So FNDC has been advocating for decades and have been a part of a lot of these wonderful additions to services, programs, and supports in our province. So the Wellbeing Program is a mental health service provider supporting deaf and hard of hearing children, youth, and adults, really all ages. The creation of the Provincial Deaf and Hard of Hearing Services, including Provincial Family Services. So this is now a ministry organization that supports families with school-age children. And that can be in the form of American Sign Language classes, which are given without cost, workshops, support during transitions, going into kindergarten, into high school, school graduation, transitioning into work. Groups for parents to come together, special events, activities and opportunities for families to connect. There's a wide range of services, and those are group services, individual services, online, in person. So the creation of Provincial Family Services really was a huge accomplishment, and families, my family included, access many of those services today. FNDC also advocated for funding for interpreting in sporting environments. So BC Deaf Sports Federation does now receive interpreting grants. So for example, if my daughter were to want to join the local Little League, I could contact BC Deaf Sports Federation and ask for an interpreter for her to fully participate on that team. Working to bring forward registered disability savings plans, video relay services. And that is when a deaf individual would like to make a phone call to a person who is hearing, and you can now connect. So bringing an interpreter up on a screen, like kind of like a Skype or a Zoom platform. So they're able to sign the conversation, and it will be interpreted live for the hearing individual on the other end. Medical interpreting services, having interpreters provided for doctor's appointments, in hospital, basically in healthcare settings. The creation of the newborn early hearing screening. And that really it is a stark difference to when FNDC first started to now. So the vast majority of babies are screened at birth in the hospital or shortly thereafter in public health. To see if they identify with a hearing difference. And that early identification and referral to early intervention services is so important because there's a critical language acquisition window from birth to 5. So you don't want to be discovering that your child may be deaf or hard of hearing at 1, 2, or sometimes even 3. So now children are having the benefit of that early identification. For many children, that's early use of hearing aids. There's support from early intervention agencies in BC, and the early hearing screening really gets the ball rolling much, much sooner. Free hearing aids for preschool age children. So those first sets of hearing aids are now covered, which is wonderful because they can be quite expensive and for some families out of reach. So this ensures that children are not missing out on auditory access because of financial considerations. Cochlear implants are a newer technology that used to be limited to 2 cochlear implant surgeries per year. So for families who are wanting to choose that as an option for their child or youth, it could be quite frustrating. So advocated for unlimited cochlear implant surgery. So anyone choosing that option could take advantage of it. Replacement cochlear implant processors, funding for Gallaudet University, and National Technical Institute for the Deaf. These are the only 2 post-secondary institutions in the world that offer ASL as the language of instruction in educational settings. So you have educators and staff who are themselves deaf or ASL fluent, teaching all classes in ASL in that accessible environment. So we have students, from all over the world traveling to those 2 schools, which are located in the United States, and there's funding for BC students to attend those schools. And last on the list, ASL credit courses at colleges and universities. So just that formal recognition of ASL as a full and complete language, and having that qualify as a 4-credit course, and just adding more opportunities for people to learn ASL in our society. So that is not by any means everything that is on the list, but those are just some of the wonderful things that FNDC has advocated for and been a part of in the past 30 years. In terms of deaf education, there hasn't been much change, unfortunately, in the last 30 years. Things have kind of just been running along as is. There is currently a committee that has come together with various stakeholders that is reviewing the current situation and hoping to have a proposal bring to the Ministry of Education in 2023, which is exciting to think that some change could be on the horizon there. And FNDC is very much involved and has been advocating for quite some time for change in deaf education, and it's very exciting to be on the cusp of that. Okay, some other things that FNDC does. We have a quarterly newsletter, and that focuses a little bit more on articles and information that families can really benefit from, maybe don't know where to find, and you can find it in our newsletter. More timely email updates and social media posts about information that families can benefit from, events in the community, and opportunities for families to come together. We offer workshops for parents at different times throughout the year, and family events such as we do Family Day ice skating every year. We hold an annual picnic in partnership with some other community organizations. And speaking of other partnerships, often working with provincial family services or other stakeholders in the community to provide opportunities for deaf children and youth and their families. Most recently, last weekend, we partnered with Surrey Schools and Provincial Family Services to offer a 2-day family ASL weekend. So this was an immersive language opportunity for families to come out. Parents had sign language classes and children had ASL rich learning environments, activity groups, a couple of shared meals, presentations, and just a really nice way for families to come together and connect. Committees. We serve on a lot of committees. It's really important for deaf children's their language access rights and their needs to be recognized and to be included when decisions are made. So just really advising and making sure that those children aren't overlooked when some of these changes are happening. And also one of the big things that is just amazing and absolutely my family loves attending every year is the Hornby Island Family Deaf Camp. This is a wonderful camp that's held at the Tribune Bay Outdoor Education Center on Hornby Island. It takes a couple of ferries, three ferries actually, to get there for me and our family, but that's definitely part of the joy of the experience. And it's just such a beautiful location. And this camp is for anyone who has a deaf family member, and families come from all over the province. And it's just really great to be in a space where people get you. Everyone's, coming from the same place and understanding. Yeah, it's just a really wonderful environment. It's language rich and fully accessible. So ASL is the Deaf Youth Today staff are using ASL in conjunction with the Tribune Bay staff who work at the Education Center. We also have professional interpreters and student interpreters from Douglas College to ensure that all of the activity groups have accessibility. So in so many other places in our children's lives, there are barriers to language. And when we go to this family camp, it's an opportunity for everyone to be included, deaf and hard of hearing children, their siblings, parents, and it's just a wonderful, really fun several days. The Education Center has a lot of great activities. We're right on the water. There's a beautiful beach. So water activities, boating, climbing, rappelling, hiking, and then there's arts and crafts and campfires in the evenings with ASL skits and different language opportunities. It's just an amazing camp. And families, like I say, come from all over, make those connections and have those lifelong relationships, with other families that they meet at this camp. So I've actually got a video now that I'm gonna turn it over to just to give you an idea about what that camp looks like.
When you share the video, you will have to share it with sound.
Oh, the video does not have sound in some portions.
Okay.
And yeah, the sound will come on when there's sound.
Then it's fine. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks for checking.
The staff are amazing, and they just make a really cool environment for kids, for adults, for all the people here. It's just lots of fun. It's easy going, kind of relaxed, and it's like a really beautiful setting. But I think the people make it. Yeah.
And I'm just noticing that the captions aren't coming on. So I will interpret that portion. One moment. Just watching our son, because at home there are no other deaf kids. And at here, he's just comfortable. There's so many people I've never met before, but I already feel so close. Like we're one big family. The relationships are strong. Well, the main difference in this camp, obviously, is the ASL, that language access. There's professional interpreters. There's also Douglas College student interpreters. And there's an opportunity for parents who may be newer to ASL or unsure about something to ask questions and to be fully involved. It's really nice. So did you go on the boat? No. Did you like going on the boat? And we jumped over the waves and the water was splashing and spraying us. Yes, it was spraying us right in my face. It gives my daughter
the opportunity
to meet all new friends
relationships
and form relationships the rest of her life.
To meet like older adults.
And it's wonderful to meet older adults to look up to. Why is camp fun? Do we have one friend at camp? Two friends? No. How many friends? 5. 5 friends? Oh, 4 friends. 5 friends? No. 10. How many friends? So many friends. 10? No. How many? Countless friends. That's why. That's what's best about camp. We get to see our friends all day. We get to socialize and have fun with them all the time. It's the best. Yes. So my oldest, who's 14, it was really great. The first night she felt a little bit out of the loop because she was, one of the only hearing people in a group of deaf children. But then she got comfortable and she was coming back to me saying, look at the new science I learned today. And it was a really good opportunity for her to see that, there are lots of different deaf children and youth. It's not just her brother. She's not just signing for him, that she's using sign language to connect with others and to make friendships. So it was really cool.
Here we go.
Today we need to
Camp. At the ending.
So that's just a glimpse of what a family deaf camp looks like. And like I say, it's just a unique, one-of-a-kind experience. Families typically come once and then they're hooked. And it's just a wonderful, wonderful way for families to connect and be supported and to have a fully accessible experience with their children. So it's one of the highlights of our year, and I know it's a great part of our program. Then came Deaf Youth Today. So we introduced myself at the beginning, a family network for deaf children. And then we created a summer program called Deaf Youth Today. And this is day camps, opportunities for deaf and hard of hearing kids throughout the summer in a variety of settings. So this is for deaf children and youth who are school age from anywhere in BC. And this is for deaf children and youth who are comfortable in an ASL assigning environment. So they're either fluent, having ASL as their primary language, or are learning to sign. And we do sometimes, we are able to welcome hearing siblings and children of deaf adults. So these are parents who are themselves deaf and have had hearing children, but those children, their first language is ASL. So we are sometimes able to welcome them as well. They're fantastic language models. And like I say, the community is very small and very welcoming. So there's a lot of connection between, deaf parents and parents with deaf children, and a lot of support. So Deaf Youth Today is a variety of ASL camps for really focusing on language development and enhancement, and providing that accessible experience. So, for typically hearing kids, you can sign up for pretty much any summer camp, and you can expect that the other kids at that camp will share the same language as you. And that's not the case for our deaf children. So these camps, bringing together deaf children, really, for example, for my daughter, if everyone else in the camp knows sign language, she can chat with any of the kids directly, not having to go through an interpreter, following camp staff and counselors. It's a fully accessible environment for her. So a lot of times we think about inclusion as integration, as having, for example, my daughter participating in a camp with typically hearing children. And, she does go to those camps with an interpreter, and she enjoys them. But when she goes to Deaf Youth Today camp, that is for her the everyday typical experience of having a shared language, being able to fully communicate and participate in all aspects of that camp. So that's why it's really great to have those cohorts and to have opportunities for deaf and hard of hearing kids to come together to have that typical experience. The camps encourage friendships, often lifelong friendships, socializing, independence, just all of those really great, social, emotional skill building opportunities that kids have in camp settings. And it also really supports our deaf youth in some of those early leadership skills and becoming ready to be the leaders of the future. So as mentioned, we have camps for deaf kids, sometimes for their siblings, and CODAs, that's children of deaf adults. And then we also added a second Hornby Island camp. So we have the Hornby Island Family Deaf Camp, but we also now have the Deaf Kids Camp. So this takes place right after, they're both in July, but this is an overnight camp for kids without parents. So we often have families who come to family camp and participate as a family, and then other family members leave, and the deaf child gets to stay with their friends and have a few more nights of overnight camp on their own, which is really exciting for them. And we also have a counselor in training program. So before hiring deaf youth as staff, as counselors and leaders of our camps, we do have this program which really allows younger deaf youth to get that hands-on experience and a little bit of practice, and what does that look like to develop those skills, and then they can apply to become staff in future. Like many organizations, when the pandemic hit, we did have to pivot to providing online programs and services. It was challenging, especially with the medium of ASL. It's very much a three-dimensional, real-world language, but we adapted, and the DYT staff were amazing. So we had virtual camp, camp in a box. Staff would mail out activity boxes, so kids would open them up, on Zoom and participate in activities together. Again, led by deaf staff, and with interpreters present for children who are newer to ASL and still learning. So we were able to keep those programs and services going, but just not quite the same. We weren't able to have family camp or the overnight camps during the first couple of years of the pandemic. So we were extremely happy to be able to resume with in-person camp opportunities this summer, and get back to family deaf camp, which was just wonderful to be back after so many years. And it was actually really nice because we added more online programming. We were able to connect with some children and families in more remote locations in the province who haven't necessarily been able to take advantage of the programs we have, which are predominantly based out of the Lower Mainland. So we now are continuing with some online programming in addition to our in-person camps and family camps and such. DYT, knowing that we are the only provider of ASL accessible language environments, camp environments in the province. So working with families to ensure that kids can attend. Sometimes, there's logistics that need to be sorted out. Sometimes that's connecting families to help out with transportation, just to ensure that kids have the opportunity to attend a language accessible camp. That includes reducing or removing financial barriers for some families with low incomes. Again, we really want to ensure that all children have those language-rich opportunities, and a family's financial status shouldn't be a barrier, to those accessibility rights. We also share information with families about other resources and events in the deaf community as they come up. And we provide one-on-one personal support workers. As I mentioned earlier, up to 40% of deaf children and youth have other additional disability support needs. So it's really important to make sure that we're thinking of those needs and ensuring that they can be fully included in our language-rich camps as well. Just looking at the time. All right. And lastly, we have employment opportunities for deaf youth and adults. So deaf applicants who may themselves identify as deaf or hard of hearing, but who are fluent in ASL or actively learning ASL and can use that in their work, can apply to work for Deaf Youth Today. For those under 20, typically they go through our counselor in training program. So transition into employment and being the leaders in our programs. That can be volunteer and or work experience, depending on the needs of the individual. It really teaches our youth and young adults to be independent, responsible. They do have to have the desire and the skill set to be able to work with and supervise young children. But it's just amazing to see the kids who were attending camp, growing and maturing and going through the counselor and training program, and then coming to DYT as staff, and really just giving back to that next generation. It's wonderful. I remember myself the first time I was involved as a volunteer interpreter at some of the programming and camp experiences quite maybe about 20 years ago now, and to see that those kids who were campers at the time are now the leaders, not only in DYT, but also in the deaf community and in positions across the province. It's just really wonderful to see how the programs and services support our community, and it's wonderful to see it thrive. And I think that is, yes, everything in my presentation today. So For those who are here, I just wanted to ask if you had any questions. Is there anything you'd like me to discuss further? I'm happy to open it up.
Well,
Don't see any questions.
there was only one person who left, so.
No problem. If somebody is watching the live stream or the recording, my email address is Brianne, BRIANNE @fndc.ca. And our website is www.fndc.ca. So if you have any questions, or if you watch this recording at a later time and have a question you'd like to ask, please do reach out. We're always happy to hear from you. And thank you very much for having me today. I appreciated the opportunity to share a little bit about what we do.
Okay, that was really nice.
Thank you. It was nice to know that you were there, and we had a couple of people following along.
Yeah, it was really nice, like many new things to know.
Yes, yeah, and hopefully if families with deaf children or youth connect with Connectra in the future, that you'll remember today and put them in touch.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Have a great day.